Standard data and message rates apply in this nationwide contest.
That's income to 200-200. This is the Ross Kaminsky Show. Now, Ross Kaminsky on Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
All right, we're very privileged to have Jefferson County Sheriff Jeff Shrader back with us today. We spoke with Jeff yesterday morning when, understandably, Jeff, you seemed a little bit weary after a very difficult previous night. I hope you got a little more sleep last night, but in a way, I imagine you're still dealing with a lot.
Well, there's a lot going on. Yeah, I did sleep a little bit more restful. I'll certainly say that. We've been mindful that this is the anniversary week of the tragedy at Columbine, and our focus has been on that and making sure that that is a safe event or series of events for the sake of the surviving students that were involved and the parents who lost the greatest in that horrible event.
Yesterday, this is going to sound like it's out of left field, but I promise you I have a point. Yesterday, a guy was arrested in New York for trying to walk into St. Patrick's Cathedral with some gas cans. You know, apparently, I don't know if he's a lunatic or what, but he saw what happened at Notre Dame and I guess felt some kind of odd sort of inspiration to do something or threaten something or whatever. And it reminds me of why it is so appropriate that you and other law enforcement around Colorado are maintaining a higher level than average of vigilance and presence at schools. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Those copycat scenarios unfortunately do play out sometimes. Every April, we know that there's a heightened sense of concern with threats that are made at Columbine High School. We take every one of them very serious, not that they don't go on at other schools, and we take those serious as well. There just happens to be more that happen at Columbine, especially during the month of April. And so the actions of one, we certainly hope that it doesn't inspire another action. There have been a number of events that have referenced back to Columbine over the course of the last 20 years, and yeah, we are mindful of that. We are looking for the behaviors that are out of the norm, just as in that story in New York, and also some of the things that appeared very out of the norm with Saul Paez.
As you said, Columbine in particular, and other schools as well, get a lot of threats. What was it about this situation that felt so different and caused this much larger reaction than we normally see from threats to schools? It seemed like it felt different.
It did feel different, and that caused some of the initial reaction with locking down schools in South Jefferson County, which translated then to other school districts. But some of the things that, as information became available, and it certainly was what we knew at that time when we were learning it. One, it was in very close proximity to the Columbine anniversary. Two, there was this young girl who had some fascination with Columbine and had purchased 3 one-way tickets in successive days to the Denver metro area, and then also purchased a pump-action shotgun in close proximity to Columbine High School. Mm-hmm. All of those things adding up to very odd behavior, concerning behavior, alarming behavior.
Right. And going to that level of effort, going to another state, buying a gun when you get here, all of that, and apparently having said or made clear back at home that she was fascinated with Columbine. I understand why the reaction was as big as it was. Some people say, some of my listeners texting, emailing, asking Jeff whether the fact that we ended up with 500,000 plus kids out of school represents that school security isn't good enough as it stands right now. I'm sure you've heard this in the last 24 hours. What's your reaction?
Well, we our plans the evening before the schools were shut down, a lot of our effort, the stuff that you wouldn't necessarily see, was going into planning of how do we open schools, how do we provide additional resource in light of what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. That was our conversation yesterday afternoon as well. How do we get things back to normal? Schools should be that safe environment for kids to learn. We know that. We want it to be as productive as possible. And so that's where a lot of our focus is how do we get those things back to normal? Obviously, we know that there is no perfectly safe site, but we're going to do our best to make sure that it is as safe as it possibly can be in all of the schools that we interact with.
Yesterday, the Denver Post published an Associated Press article, and the headline is, "Some polls show parents growing fears of dangers at school." And they talked about some percentage of American parents who are not confident in their child's safety at school, although they also note that the percentage of parents who are confident is higher. But still, they're talking about maybe 20% who are not at all or not very confident in their child's safety at school. And I saw you on television yesterday in a press conference, and one of the things that you said really jumped out at me, and I wanted to ask you to talk about it here and elaborate on it. And you said that in your role as sheriff and your department's role, it is not just to prevent crime, stop crime, deal with crime, but also to help people be less afraid and live a normal life even when difficult things are going on. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yeah, it's a theory within the community policing model that the role of law enforcement is not just to reduce crime, and certainly we want to do that, but also to reduce the fear of crime. When people are fearful, their reactions are different. That's the role that public safety law enforcement plays in society. Again, not just to stop the wrongdoers, but also give a level of comfort to the people who are in our society, so that they're as comfortable as they possibly can be. The reference that I was making at that time referred to listening to the call very late in the evening that the school superintendents were having and the deliberation that they were having about should they close schools, how widespread should that be, should it be in a unified fashion, or were individual districts going to be making their own decision? And I thought it was very thoughtful conversation on the part of some very smart people who have been charged with education and also having to be mindful of children's safety as well as their comfort, their absence of fear while they are in the school environment, and that gives them the best opportunity to learn. So it was that theory resonated to me when I was listening to that conversation and the deliberation that those school administrators were having.
What would you say to people, including, again, some of my listeners who say, was this, or who ask, was this an overreaction to one girl with a gun having schools closed, in Weld County and Douglas County, that massive range of the massive part of the Front Range of Colorado? Do you think it was an overreaction? We know what we know at a particular point in time, and those people who are making those decisions for those school districts obviously were operating with the information that they had. They didn't know information. They were also concerned
that there would be confusing information if they had different policies in different districts, and obviously that has to start and stop somewhere. One of the points that was made by one of the school superintendents was that parents, knowing what parents are hearing now, parents are not likely in large numbers to send their kids to school anyway. So some of that, and the comment that followed was some of that decision had already been made for them because of what they anticipated parental reaction to be. I probably would have kept my child home from school if they were still young. One of the most vivid memories that I have of the Columbine time frame was the day after working till 4 a.m, going home, getting a couple hours of sleep. I lived in a different school district at the time, but I took my daughter to school, and in spite of a school resource officer being there, several teachers greeting every student, my daughter was absolutely scared to get out of the car and go to school.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Those experiences resonate, I think, with just about any parent, and certainly with me. So I don't know. Knowing what we know today, it's easy to say it was an overreaction. 2 days ago, school superintendents didn't know that. They didn't know the outcome.
My special guest, Jefferson County Sheriff Jeff Shrader, who was at the center of the manhunt or the woman hunt for the young woman, Sol Pais, who was found dead of suicide yesterday, ending the immediate threat or apparent threat to our schools. Jeff, some people have been asking why she wouldn't have been in a database that would have prevented gun purchase. And I don't want to ask you to speculate on what did or didn't happen in Florida, so I would like to make this a more generic question. Do you have any thoughts, and in a way this plays into the red flag conversation, kind of, sort of, but do you have any thoughts on how such a process would or should work here in Colorado, and any recommendations that you would make right now to parents, let's say, or teachers who are listening, if someone appears, very troubled, and maybe they're not known to own a gun, so it's not really a red flag kind of situation. We got to send the police to take a gun. We don't think she owned a gun before. But what is the right way that is consistent with being a good parent, consistent also with believing in the Second Amendment, to try to deal with a situation like this?
The information known in this case was learned and being learned after the fact, after she had purchased. Her parents reported her missing, and she was already here. By the time law enforcement learned certain things, she probably had already purchased the gun. There probably was not the time for some marker to be put in a database. Law enforcement officers deal with people with mental health issues every day, and they have to be mindful of that there are dangerous situations every day. And I know that at least weekly I have deputies that are dealing with people with mental illness that are potentially contemplating suicide. And they have to approach those things so that they do it in the safest manner possible for the individual, for the deputies who are responding, other police officers who are responding, and the general public. And I'm just amazed at the quality of work that goes on day in and day out by cops all over the state of Colorado.
Is there a procedure in place or even a law in place that allows it, if one of your deputies has an interaction with someone who is clearly in significant mental distress, to put a flag in, a CBI database or something that would at least temporarily prevent that person from buying a gun. And it's funny because I'm getting this kind of question from listeners who I know absolutely hate the red flag law. And they're asking me this. So what's your take?
Yeah, I have not been a fan of the red flag law either.
Right.
Does that system exist? If somebody has been adjudicated as a mentally defective individual, then there is the prevention for that. But that is part of the process.
And that's not a determination that is made or can legally be made by your deputy, right? He has to go to a mental health professional or something?
Well, ultimately, a judge has to make that determination, taking into consideration mental health professional input. Ross, I hate to be rude. I have another appointment.
No, it's no problem, Jeff. And we're going to go too. I'm very grateful for your time today and yesterday, and thanks for everything that you did to keep our communities safe.
Thank you, Ross. You have a good day.
Okay, you too. Jeff Shrader, Jefferson County Sheriff. Very kind of him to give us so much time yesterday and today. I doubt he was on any other show for the past couple of days. So a lot of stuff there. I brought up a lot of questions for Sheriff Shrader that a lot of you have been asking me by email and text, and I hope you got some answers, whether or not you liked them, whether or not you agreed with them. I at least hope that you feel that I brought your concerns to the sheriff and got you some answers that you find interesting and informative. And to the extent that there are public policy changes that might need to be made, I'm sure those conversations are coming. I'm also sure, there already are, especially on the left, people who are using this as a reason to discuss more aggressive gun regulation. I'm not on board with that, but we'll have a lot more to talk about with that over coming days. I sort of doubt that the legislature will be able to do anything in this legislative session, but it wouldn't surprise me if Democrats come back with more gun control in next year's legislative session. All right, here's what we're going to do. When we come back, we expect to be able to take live for you Attorney General Barr's press conference announcing and discussing the release of the Mueller report, which he will then give to Congress. We'll do it right after this.
This report is sponsored by Lowe's.